And Varun, when you started the glitch, at that time the world of content, the world of the way brands were marketing was very different from what it is today. So, in the sort of decade plus that you ran the glitch, you've seen marketing evolve. Right? You saw social media actually come in that time period. You saw brands first doubt that it would work and then started using it. You saw it start with Facebook, then move to YouTube, then go to Instagram, and now you're seeing saturation of social media as well. So, as you started the glitch, what have you seen in sort of the evolution of the way things were done, and how did you, as a business, keep pivoting or thinking about, hey, we need to get better at content production? Oh, it's not TV style shoots anymore; it's shorter format content. How do you keep evolving as a business and changing your mind?
So the standing joke we had as founders was that I think we pivoted every year over the 14 years that we ran that business because when we started Glitch, the concept of creating content on the internet for brands did not exist. It was all about television commercials, etc. So firstly, people were like, why would we pay you for this Facebook to free? Right? It was literally one of the first responses we got. And from that point onwards, we just kept saying, okay, what can we innovate with? How can we reach people where they are? So we were production and content first in year one and maybe some part of year two. From there, we went on to doing tech as part of it. We went on beyond that doing digital. So we looked at where the audience was going and where the platforms were going. And we kept in mind, what do we need to add as services? So every year we'd sit down and say, what do we need to add as services for next year? And kind of keep doing that. But I think the evolution was literally, where was the consumer really going? And you got to pivot keeping that in mind, and not where they are today, but where will they be tomorrow or like day after. And that was a consistent process. So over time, we became a creative and media agency primarily because we saw that's where all the services would reside together. But you could never put us in a singular box for too long because, I mean, the only way you can keep growing as a business is if you don't stay in the same place. And that's what we consistently did. But the only thing I would add on to that is that you have to also have someone maintaining and focusing on today enough that if you're only looking at the future and focusing on the pivot, your today gets kind of like pushed to the side. And thankfully, because we were multiple co-founders and a large enough leadership team we built over time who had ownership, they took care of today, we focused on tomorrow. And some of us looked at day after as well. And that's kind of what helped.
So Shashank, you went back to Unilever. You realized that that was what was the right thing for you to do at that time. Obviously, you had a great run at Unilever. I've spoken to you about it, and also a lot of people who you worked around with. But then at some point, you left probably the dream job, the most stable job, the company that is the gold standard of FMCG consumer products in our country, to start up. Now, I worked in private equity before I started my business, Dr. Vedya's as well. And I remember that card could get me to meet anyone, right? Like everyone was excited to meet me, happy to meet me. And then there was a time when I quit my job and started up, and then nobody wanted to meet me. So when you leave that world of structure, that world of sort of prestige of the job that you have and the thousands of crores of P&L that you manage, and you start talking about a few lakhs, what was that feeling like in sort of starting up and going there?
I personally loved it. Yes, a lot of the past privileges suddenly went away. Your card meant nothing. You didn't get meetings and all of that. Of course, it happened. Thankfully, I had never allowed myself to become too used to those privileges. Like even back at Unilever, I would travel very frugally, even though I knew the company was paying the bill. I would constantly have a voice in my head reminding me that whatever you're getting in terms of respect, privilege, luxuries, etc., is not because of you. Don't get used to it. Because I think somewhere inside me, I always knew that eventually life will lead to me doing something of my own. I think this was a small voice in my head always, used to go up and down depending on life stage, but so there was always, it was almost a defense mechanism. Like for example, when I quit Unilever at the age of 34, again to start the whole truth. I had zero debt because I had crafted life that way, both mentally never getting used to the luxuries of a big company, financially not having anyone to answer to. We had zero EMI, zero, parents were completely independent, no liabilities at all. So honestly, while I missed it for a bit, it wasn't that big a shock. The joy of building, which I theoretically knew would kicked in, and that more than made up for it. Most importantly, I think we always think of it in terms of leaving something. Uh, I've found that the best reason to start something new is not to run away from something, but to run towards something. Uh, this time I was running towards what I believed was my life's purpose. The whole truth is literally what I now feel I was born to do. And hence, that joy more than made up for whatever little luxury and privilege went away.
And I think Shashank talked about a really important point, right? I think as we think about the next legs of our careers, being a founder is obviously very glorified. It's now talked about largely in social media. Shark Tank is all around us. But even if you are working in a company, uh, thinking like an entrepreneur or being an entrepreneur is really important. I remember when I started my first job in 2013, I worked at a private equity fund. I actually got an internship, not a job. And I went to an Ivy League college and I was paid 40,000 rupees after that expensive education. But my dad told me, look, you have the chance of getting a full-time job. So make yourself indispensable. And I think that's amazing learning that Shashank gave us just because you had the opportunity to live the comfortable life with the prestige of a very large company. You still live in that frugal manner. So you remember that it's someone's money you're spending, right? Varun, I wanted to ask you about sort of long journey with Glitch, lots of changes in the world around you and still staying relevant as a company. And then at some point you guys got an offer from one of the largest advertising and media companies in the world to acquire your business. The acquisition was slightly different from the one that I had, where you had to stay in the business and work with the sort of new partner and handhold the business and take it through its new path. So obviously, I'd love to know about that journey of handholding it. But first, the thought process that went into, okay, I've built this company for more than a decade. I have this offer now. At some point, not be my name on the door of CEO or founder of the company. How did you go through taking that decision, or Rohit and you go through taking that decision?
So the way we looked at our business from day one was, how do you kind of give it two things, right? How do you give it scale in the long term? And also how do you give it stability for the core team? So why did we go from production to agency was because production is sporadic. You get projects ton of projects one month, you might not get enough the next month. Consistent revenue isn't there. So the agency model is you're getting some amount of retainer in. So let's not take away production, add agency on top. And we kept adding more and more services, keeping that in mind. How do you make sure that money is stable, profits are growing, revenue is growing? Around the time when we started, I think we got acquired in 2017. We started having conversations in 2014, 2015 is when we first started getting approached. We looked at a few things. How will we maintain these two things if we stay independent? Obviously, the trajectory and the journey would be far longer. If you got acquired, can we boost much faster? Can we grow faster? And honestly, it also gives you as an individual a certain amount of personal wealth coming in. How long would it take me personally and the rest of us that same, how would we get that kind of money? How much longer will that take? And so we chose partners keeping that in mind. Who had the best offer in terms of money was obviously a strong contender. But secondly, who's going to give us the most amount of scale in the long term and who takes care of our core team? Because while we knew that we might not stay more than the 5 years that we had to stay in the business, a lot of our leadership would. So will their career opportunities increase? Will the business thrive and become, what we believe it can be within the ecosystem? And we made the choice basis that. And all these things sound great when you think about it, and then eventually it happens. And will everything happen how you planned it to happen? No. But as long as you tick enough boxes, and I'm talking hindsight right now, I still feel that we made the right choice, because the agency business also went from a certain trajectory to now flatlining the way it has and really changing into something else altogether. So I feel it's also the right time to take decisions. So one is the pivot, one is the sale, but like, do you do it at the right time? And in hindsight, our timing was spot on.
Yeah, and I think it's also I think what you're not saying, and I know we've discussed it as well, is the humility of taking that decision, right? Because I think as a founder, uh, you are building a business. Everyone around you is cheering for you when things are going well, and sometimes you just feel like, hey, I can do this better than anybody else. But I think sitting down with a mirror in front of you and taking that call that, hey, now it's my time to go, and there is someone else who will take it
Because
forward.
you are not your business. The business should be able to run without
Correct,
you.
correct, right? And Sanjeev sir this morning was talking about building generational companies as well. And I think when we sold our business as well, it was with that humility that, hey, uh, this business will not go further online. And unlike Shashank, we didn't know how to do offline, right? So we just really bad at it. So made the call that, hey, if this business has to go forward, it'll go forward offline, and we are not the right people for it. Shashank, one very interesting thing about your brand uh, is that it has a sort of deep personal journey associated with it as well, right? And a lot of people know about it, but some people don't. That you also ran a blog on health called FitShit, and the company is also called FitShit Health, right? So I've read this blog, and a lot of the company's ethos, a lot of the company's thought process, a lot of what you talk about on social, the copy, the way it's written, comes from that blog as well, right? So, talk to us about converting your blog into a company and a brand that all of us love, and how you thought about sort of that thought process, right?
See, when I was writing the blog, I had no clue that one day there'll be a company at the other end of it, right? Like, I was writing the blog to share my learnings about health and fitness as someone who'd been through that obesity journey multiple times and who felt cheated by brands. I was just sharing it, right? And I think it's only that authenticity that can get you followership and readership, which happened, which in turn told me that, hey, A, people seem to be resonating with what I'm saying. B, this problem with food that I have seems to be a larger problem than just my problem. I'm not the only guy who has this problem. And C, shit, I'm a marketer. If the problem is brands lying, then why can't I use my marketing skills to create a brand that doesn't lie? Right? All of this happened in the process of writing the blog. I never started the blog thinking that it'll lead to something. If, in fact, as you remember, I'd come back from Fasos thinking that I'm so burnt. I used to tell everyone, कुछ भी करूँगा life में startup नहीं करूँगा, right? Like I will do anything but startup because that had been my experience. But once the brand started, I realized what depth had already been built through the blog. I already had a voice. I already had something to say. I already had 50 topics which I knew people wanted to listen about or talk about. And all of that just, gave the brand a certain depth on day one that usually is missing in brands which are born out of a market gap. And this is where you'll hear this term of mercenary versus missionary founders. 95% founders and companies in the world are mercenary, which is you see a gap in the market and you go and fill that gap. And some very, very profitable businesses are built that way. Most of the old, Gujarati businesses are this, that, no one's making this one ball bearing. I'll go make this one ball bearing and I'll make a killing out of this. The missionary folks are the more emotional folks, generally have a higher failure rate on turning profitable. But that's who I was. Like, I was doing this because I really believe this deserves to exist. Many people tell us this is ahead of its time, etc. But that doesn't matter because it really is my purpose. I'm doing this because I believe this deserves to exist, and that belief came from the journey, which converted into the blog, which later on told me that listen, blogging is just standing on the sidelines and shouting that the world is a bad place. What are you doing about it? Are you creating an alternative which allows people to make a better choice? And once I had that lens, there was no option but to go and do the startup.
Varun, last question on your journey. So obviously, Glitch was sold to WPP, and then you had time on your hands, and you were thinking of various things, and that's when we met the first time. Actually, I think it was 2022, and I think you explored a bunch of ideas from starting a business in the personal care space to creating content, which you still continue to do in some way, shape, or form, to coaching, mentoring, to eventually going back to building with your partner, who was also a key member of your previous business with the Glitch, right? So, uh, a lot of us will go through times in our life where at a crossroads, right, where we have various options, but we have to pick some or one of the options. I was also at a similar crossroads when I sold my business, and while it was a exciting, positive outcome, I was at 29 years old, completely free. I had nothing to do for an entire day, and I was taking table tennis coaching at 2 p.m., right? Which is sounds exciting from the outside, but it's scary from the inside because after that table tennis coaching, you have nothing, absolutely nothing. You can lie down in your bed and do nothing. So, at this crossroads in your career, which took about a year and a half for you to figure out, how did you think through the various options and finally come to what you've chosen? And by the way, I'm really happy with what you finally end up choosing.
So I went through this phase. I call it a good midlife crisis to have. Is that the year I sold?
Yeah, I didn't use that word.
I've always used it because the year we sold the company is the year I started hosting a podcast called Advertising is Dead. It was basically for me saying I've worked in the industry, built here, sold it here. I have no idea about the industry itself because I hadn't spent time talking to people, and I was doing that on the side. So creating content became something which was a great way for me to channel a side of me, which I think through working and building a company over time, you sometimes forget to spend time doing. And then around the time I was quitting Glitch as well, it was, we were deep within COVID, was at home, went back to what is almost default and core. I think we all go back to what is default and core. And for me, it was creating content. So I was just creating content for, let's say, for the podcast, for Instagram, for YouTube, all that from home and all of that. But I think constantly there was a thought about the first time you build something, if you're young enough, it becomes about, it's something you have to do, right? I think Glitch didn't come from, oh, this is a great business plan. We had no business plan. We were working in television. Television's starting to do cool stuff. Where's the cool stuff happening? It's happening online. Let's go do that. That was literally our business plan. This time it was about, okay, I've done something. It's worked. We've had a successful journey. We've had a great exit. Do I just sit back and just find something more comfortable? Or is there something that is going to get me off this couch and make me actually go build it? So I think when you and I met for the first time, I was trying to find a very strong why. That why led me from everything from, like you said, male grooming, personal care brand, wellness brand, coaching platform, everything else, and came back to one thing that happened in parallel during this period is that I'm also a father to two kids. I have a 6.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and constantly spending so much time with them and figuring out what they were dealing with and they still are dealing with. And that's where Emomi came from. The idea was that, we're so over-indexed on IQ in the world today, but nobody talks to kids about how you can learn emotional intelligence and how can you build EQ within them. And it started with that. So I think it took me a long journey to figure out what the strong why was. And like Shashank said, I think this is one of those where I can see myself doing this for a very long time because the core is something I truly believe is needed. Like, the biggest problems that most companies believe is that leaders don't have enough EQ and emotional intelligence. So that's what we're looking to solve for now.
And I actually felt it. I felt the passion towards it because I'm a new parent. My baby is now 1 year old, and I was really
Three parents here.
nervous. I was really nervous before having a kid, and so I went to Varun and I said, "You're going to take me out to lunch, and you're going to tell me everything that I'm going to experience now."
That
And
is the biggest pivot you will have in your life. You become a parent, that's when your life pivots.
and both Shashank and I have a lot to learn from you. So I think when we were having lunch that day, the passion with which you were talking about parenting and the advice you gave me actually, I knew that it was something that would be something that you'd really enjoy. One last question to both of you, more generalized outside of your journeys, and we can open up to the audience for questions because I know they'll have a lot of things to ask both of you. So I started this conversation saying that pivots are important in life. We will constantly have to change the way we think. We'll have to change our mindset and the way we do things. But we have to be strict about not just accepting failure very easily, right? Not just saying, okay, it didn't work, I'll move to the next thing, I'll move to the next thing. Because then your entire life becomes changing things. So, a more philosophical question. When do you know it's the right time to actually say, okay, I need to turn or move or pivot?
When is the right time to pivot? Um, when you feel comfortable, to be honest, is where I feel is a big signal, right? Because sometimes you feel, okay, everything's going great. You know, when you're sitting in an office, sitting on a chair, you lean back saying, Abhi sab kuch theek hai. That's when you'll literally fall back because you can see it coming. That's a good, I always use that as a signal. Saying everything seems fine, there is a need to kind of pivot because there is something that you're not seeing. But also, you got to look at it by saying, because the world's always changing, where is the world going has to be a constant focus in your head. If you don't have that, then you won't see the signals. So that's always been my guiding principle, saying where is the world really going, and keep an eye on that. But also, third point on that is that you have to also say, where do I really want to go? You know, at some point, if there are so many things happening around you, but there are specific things you want to work towards in your own life, then which pivot will take me closer to that tomorrow? I would say these would be the criteria to tick off before you go there.
It's a great question. I would say, first of all, the word pivot is a bit misleading because it sounds like a 180-degree turn or complete change, etc. I actually think when it feels like an evolution is a good time to pivot. Because it's not a pivot really. It's I think of it as, every challenge you take on in life is like climbing a mountain. And once you get on top of the mountain is when you're able to see other mountains around. And then you realize, oh shit, I either barked up the wrong mountain or there is a higher mountain to climb. But you only get to see it once you've climbed the first mountain. Right? So the right pivots are the ones which feel like an evolution, not like running away from pain. And I think that's my marker, that whenever I feel like changing something drastically, I ask myself, am I running away from pain or am I running towards this new, bigger mountain that I want to climb? And these are two completely different things in feelings.
I think that's a.
I would add one thing to this. There's a standard joke that Pooja and I have. Pooja is my co-founder, also a partner. Is that there are two ways for you to make choices. One is you know exactly how the dots align and you draw the dots and you move alongside it. And there are also people like me who throw a lot of paint at the wall and then see what connects together. So you're one of two, but that gives you direction as well. You just keep trying enough things that, okay, you see a pattern somewhere and you follow it.
I think lovely way to end the conversation. I'll leave you guys with two thoughts before we move to questions. We will move to questions. I think Shashank's last statement about a pivot, the right time to pivot is not when it feels like you're running away from pain, but when it feels like an evolution. And what Varun said at the end, it's really the job of entrepreneurs, right? I used to use the analogy of throwing darts. You keep throwing darts on the dartboard until you hit the bullseye, and then you continue from there. And similarly said, put paint on a wall and look for a pattern. Really deep, profound thoughts. And thank you so much for so openly sharing your journey. Obviously, we know there are a lot of people who have questions. So we'll open up now for questions. We have about 10 minutes. So you were the first one to raise your hand. So we'll go with you first. Can we get him a mic? Maybe you can just say the question and I'll repeat it.
Hi, sir. Shashank, sir. I love your product. I'm a very like I do consume it. Sir, as a I myself Dipang Singhal, and I'm an entertainment media and IP lawyer, right? Though the question is not about pivoting. I just wanted to ask you, and follow-up question is with you, sir, as an investor, that earlier you were HUL. FMCG brands are very big on IP protections, right? To maintain that kind of exclusivity in the market, where you will, starting from your recipe, which is a trade secret, your packaging, your brand name, and it somewhere signifies your brand, and it is very important, I believe, right? How important do you think it is, and not just in FMCG industry, but the other industries as well? And so follow-up question is with you, that as an investor, that how much importance you give to the brands who have necessary IP protections before they are, to coming to you asking for money, right, to invest in your business. I've represented HUL before various courts in Delhi as well. Earlier, they are very heavy on, IP protection. And what is your take on it, especially considering that the young founders, right, be it of, FMCG brands or any other, type of startups, right, they often think it as a, big cost their business, big cost to their business. And I believe as an IP attorney, it is very important to get it sorted from the very start itself. So what are your views on it?
Sure.
So I'll tell you an anecdote first before I answer the question. The core tenet of the brand is we declare each and every ingredient on the front of pack, right? Like that's the most basic truth of the whole truth, right? That you'll never have to turn the packet around, right? And by the way, when you turn the packet around, you will also find us self-declaring the exact percentage of each ingredient, totaling up to 100%, right? Which is literally a recipe, right? When I did this, the first thing my mom told me, तुम बेवकूफ हो, तुमने अपनी पूरी रेसिपी सामने लिख दी है, right? तो कोई भी कॉपी कर लेगा, right? So this is the opposite of protecting IP. I am to writing my exact recipe on the pack, and it's not a legal mandate, right? Legally, FSSAI does not mandate you to write the exact percentages, but we do it. Why I told you this anecdote is this seems contrary to protecting any IP. I think for young brands, we first need to create some IP, right?
I am more on, just to interrupt, I am more on, the packaging and the brand name. Anyway, recipe is more of a
I'm coming
trade
to it, I'm
secret
coming
thing.
to it, yeah.
It is not as such protectable.
So packaging, product, advertising, logo, any sort of IP, I think young brands first need to focus on creating something of value. Because why will someone copy you? They'll copy you when you've created something that's awesome, right? Like that's when they'll want to copy you. Because honestly, a lot of VCs used to ask me also कि ये तो कोई भी कल बना देगा, why should we invest, etc. The moat is people's egos. Everyone thinks that they're the bee's knees and everyone else is stupid. It's only when you become really big that we will like, oh shit, ये अच्छा idea था, इसको copy करना चाहिए था. Right? So I think young brands should be focused on creating IP. And IP is not created by protecting it. IP is created by investing in it, really deepening it, etc. So I think there comes a stage in life when protecting IP and the cost of that becomes lower than the value of the IP itself. So I think it's a life stage question of when do you invest in it? You absolutely must invest in protecting your IP, but it comes at a certain life stage. Worrying about it too early might be missing the woods for the trees.
I think important points by Shashank. I will say that, look, I built a brand where there was IP. We had 100+ proprietary formulations passed down from generation to generation. The recipes, in some way, we could protect, not in terms of ingredients, because in our industry, at least, we had to declare exactly what ingredients we put in what concentration as well. But the method of manufacturing was proprietary. Having said that, I have a friend who is running a brand that started very well, and she got from 0 to 75 lakhs a month in 3 months. And she had a lot of copycats. She said a lot of people are copying the style of my advertising. A lot of people are copying the way my website looks, right? Some of these things you can't protect, right? You can't. So I think she was having sleepless nights saying, that guy's website looks like my website. He has copied the way my person talks in the ads, etc. All of that. And I said, look, you can send a legal notice. You can scare them. But at the end of the day, you are the first person to do it. And so you focus on that and creating something new, because when you create something new, they will follow you only, right? So I think some things you can protect, like you can protect your name, you can trademark your logo, you can trademark your packaging exactly. But if someone does 95%, then it's not protectable. So definitely we value IP, we value something unique, we value differentiation. But as a founder, there are some things you can protect and some things you can't.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Hello. Hello, Varunji and Arjunji, Shashankji. Let me give you guys a little bit of background about me, who I am, and what I have been doing. And based on that, my question is going to be. So my name is Umang Vatsal Tyagi. I'm a Yogacharya, yoga and meditation coach, and I've been working in this field for the last 6 to 7 years. I have a master's degree in yoga science, University of Patanjali, and since 2020, when COVID hit, my brother was also working 16 to 17 hours straight. Right? So there was so much anxiety, so much stress. I started giving sessions to people online, and people joined me from various spheres of life. They are farmers, they are corporate VPs, students, teachers. So one thing I found, my sessions were helping them so much. So I tried to make a new technique of meditation. I'm also a meditation coach, and I'm also a spiritual energy healer, pranic healer. So my sessions were able to help reduce their anxiety, their stress, any kind of anxiety within 15 minutes. And
Sorry, we have limited time. So what's the question?
really sorry. So I want to build a brand in this space, and what I have, I believe it's simply something really unique. Nobody else is doing right now. And so if there's any advice I can get from you guys, making a brand in this space, in meditation and health and mental health sector. How can I build a brand like that?
Thought about this quite a bit, right? So maybe you can take this one.
So I think that if you just look at this, right, if you're doing this are you doing this through content or are you doing this directly with people?
Directly with people.
So one of the ways you've seen this category grow, this is globally and in India as well, is that how much of this are you putting it out for free in terms of content? And of that, maybe we have 10% who might convert to maybe doing paid sessions with you online or in person. Of that, maybe there'll be a 1% who will buy a product from you, right? So you got to look at it from that lens. And once you focus on creating that, and the content you can create in whichever way, it doesn't have to be heavily produced. I think this category, because I consume a lot of content in this category as well, it's more about how are you effectively teaching people things, is where it starts. And I've said once you build trust through that, because to sell a product to someone in this category, the deepest thing they need is trust that you are giving it to them, not from, I want to get money from you, but I'm actually giving you value. And because it deals with something very internal. So how do you build that trust through content to then figuring out what their biggest problems are and then building a product makes more sense?
Since 2020 till now, I've been holding these sessions completely free of cost. So I've been doing these sessions daily basis, online sessions. So it has been free completely till now, and I do want to give value to people and help them emotionally, physically, mentally, and I've been able to do that really efficiently. But like a client of mine was not able to even read a book for like 3 or 4 months. In the last month alone, he has read 5 books, right?
Superb. Awesome.
I want to build a brand on this side.
Thank you so much. We'll take one more question.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take it from him and then we'll have to wrap. But obviously, we are here after the session as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you. Firstly, you are a great moderator. Thank you so much for that. Secondly, Varun, I had a question for you that you had pivoted a lot and you have done a lot of things, and I'm very new to the business sector. So I wanted to understand 2 things. One, when you are pivoting, you constantly reinvent the why of it. So how do you reinvent the why for yourself so that you are on the pace? And secondly, while pivoting, your personal time or the working pattern changes a lot. So how do you consider yourself managing different things while in the transition of pivoting?
So the why doesn't necessarily change even when you're pivoting, right? I think that's something Shashank spoke about earlier, is that the core stays the same. So for me, I started off as someone creating content on television to creating content for brands to now creating content as an individual to now doing it for the next company I'm building. So the core of my thing, which is content, media, creative, has stayed the same. What pivoting teaches you is that what else can you do and why should you also do that? And and that's how we should look at it. It's the what that is more important than the why in that point of time. So it's almost like saying if today everyone's consuming content in a certain way, where will they be consuming tomorrow? Are you also building towards that? So that's still a what. The core essence stays the same, and that's the best way to look at it. Because then you're not spreading yourself too thin by trying to, you're not Ajay Devgan on two bikes, right? You're on the same bike. It's just you're going in different lanes. So that's literally how we look at it, and that makes it simpler for you to find the right things to add on and to pivot towards. But you're not literally going back to my bike analogy, not jumping bikes.
Awesome. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much, all of you, for being such an amazing audience and listening to the conversation. And a big thank you to the Rise Delhi team as well for inviting us here and for allowing me to have this amazing conversation with two of my friends. I think I learned a lot through the conversation. I hope you guys did too. So we'll be around for a little bit and you can catch us. But enjoy the rest of the day and hopefully this was a good session before lunch. Thank you guys.